So I've been at this real estate thing for a few years now, and I have the honor and the privilege of mentoring newer agents, working with veteran agents, and always learning from super experienced agents. And one common thing that I'm starting to notice as our world is getting more and more snarky is bad rapport between agents. What's going on? It's your brother, your uncle, your favorite realtor's favorite realtor, Marvin. And for today's video, I'm going to share about 7 to 10 do's and do not do's, or do's and don'ts, as it relates to your communication with other real estate agents and how to handle certain responses that you get from other real estate agents directed towards you. Of course, in this video, I'm going to swing with a pretty broad brush. Not every real estate agent is like this, and not every experience is going to be like this. But if you've been doing this for as long as I've been doing this, you probably have met one or two of these types of bad characters that unfortunately they got their real estate license, so they're able to sell real estate. The first thing that I would suggest no real estate agent ever say to another real estate agent is, "Are you new?" Or better yet, "You must be new." That is the most condescending, backhanded, I don't even want to call that a compliment, but it's a very backhanded way to attack another agent. Maybe because that agent made a mistake or omitted a certain thing in a transaction. And for me, I always look at every scenario as a completely different experience. If I know I'm dealing with another agent and they send me an offer on my listing, or if I submit an offer for another agent's listing and I know that agent is new, I'm always going to be extremely kind. You know why? Because if I'm representing my buyer, I want to get my buyer the best deal possible on that property. And I personally, as friendly and as helpful as I will try to be, I'm going to take advantage of that situation for the benefit of my clients. And if I get a offer on a property as a listing agent and it's missing some documents, or it's poorly written contract with a bunch of stuff left off, I'm not going to attack that agent. You know why? Because at the end of the day, if that person is new and this is their first deal, or maybe they're, one of their first deals, they are already very, very, very insecure about making a mistake on behalf of their client. So why would I pour salt on the wound, if you will, by being very obnoxious and snarky to that agent and saying stuff like, "You must be new"? If they're new and I can probably tell they don't know what they're doing, what I would genuinely ask, especially if, for lack of a better word, they're asking for my help with an offer, because I represent my client and my brokerage's best interest, I'm not going to hold the agent's hand on the opposite end of the transaction, but I will play it in a kind of I'm going to assume that they just didn't know. The benefit of the doubt. That's the word that I'm looking for. So if I get an offer, and let's say it's missing a couple forms that I know is pertinent for this offer to be a legit contract that we go under, I'll ask them, "Hey, it looks like there's a couple documents that may be missing, or a specific document, that is missing an initial. How quickly can you get that to me?" I'm always going to assume that they just didn't know, in the mountain of paperwork that's probably what consists of a contract, that they didn't put that into the offer. And so I'll just let them know, "Hey, look, my client's ready to review this, but I did notice that it's missing this form. How quickly can you get this form to me?" And I'll tell them the exact form that it is, which in my mind is going to help them go ahead and do what they need to do, right? But I will never tell another agent. And if you're doing that, veteran agents, shame on you, because at some point you were a new agent. So the last thing you probably would have wanted to hear, if this was your first deal, was another agent low key insulting your intelligence. Yes, I may be newer to real estate, and yes, I'm making mistakes because I'm nervous and I want to get this right. But I use that as a teaching opportunity. And that's what you should do, because you never know at the end of that transaction, especially if you're the type of person that you see that individual, maybe they made a few mistakes, but they've got a certain level of drive, their communication is on point, and in all other areas, except maybe one or two with paperwork and stuff that new agents just don't know, they might be a good fit for my team. So I might low key be trying to recruit them, because I know if I help them in those small intangible areas, but they've got a lot of good traits and attributes that I think can add value to my group or any other agents that I'm working with, I'm going to make it a pleasant experience for them because that agent will never forget what it was to work with Marvin on the other side of the transaction. Hey, if you've made it this far in the video and you are a real estate professional, consider partnering with me here at Real Brokerage. Pay nothing per month, get a fantastic split, and you have the opportunity to build a business through revenue share and stock purchases. Book a call at the link below in today's video, and I'm happy to have a conversation on why I was able to grow my business exponentially by moving my practice to Real Brokerage. All right, back to the video. The next thing that you never want to ask another real estate agent, and this is for my listing agents here. Let's say you have gotten a situation where you're representing your seller and you've gotten an offer, you go under contract, and all seems well until that buyer's agent tells you that they want the roof repaired or there's mold in the property and they've got a whole bunch of stuff on their inspection report that they want your seller to take care of. The number one thing that you should not ever ask that buyer's agent is to see a copy of that inspection report. You know why? Because that buyer agent's client paid for that inspection report. So if you have some concerns about some of the requests that the buyer's agent or the buyer on behalf of the buyer's agent is asking for, what I will ask typically is to just see a screenshot of the specific areas in question that they're asking for my seller to give a concession on. That buyer paid for that. The expectation, and you got to think the mindset of an agent that thinks that my client is going to fork over an inspection report that they paid $300-400 plus and give it to your seller just because you're asking for it. And now you've the seller's low key got everything that they need to know about their home to address. That's just not how this thing works. If your client is having some concerns about the repairs that are being requested, just have them screenshot the specific areas in question because we all know every single thing on an inspection report is not going to get addressed by the seller, especially if you're buying a resale home. Maybe if you're buying new construction, yeah, they'll handle pretty much everything that's on that inspection report. But when you're buying a resale home, you are buying a used vehicle. It's not going to have a pristine condition. It's not going to be a perfect home. It's going to have its fair share of issues. But as long as it's not got the big issues that I've talked about in previous videos, foundation, roof, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, termites, things of those natures, as long as it's not those types of things, we can still make a deal happen. In many cases, especially if your state offers something like this, a lot of those kind of punch out items that the inspector might be highlighting on that report, typically the majority of those, what I call punch out items, and that's just your handyman areas, like the little things, a doorknob is loose or a window's kind of hanging a certain kind of way. That can typically be done through a home warranty or just working with a handyman to get it done. If you're a listing agent and the buyer's agent is asking for all of these kind of minutia kind of things to be addressed, I would offer it as a counter. Hey, a 1-year warranty. I'll pay, or my seller will pay up to whatever will get a bumper to bumper type of home warranty. And there's a lot of good home warranty companies that I've talked about on this channel. Just do an estimation of what the platinum package, if you will, for a home warranty through a specific company would cost. In most cases, we're talking $600-700, and offer that as a counter to address some of those punch out items that are the buyer's agent is requesting. Keep this thing moving as much as you can as it relates to the deal. Like I said, unless they're asking for like $40,000-50,000 off of the asking price, in a lot of ways you can negotiate these things and work on behalf of your seller client to get this train to the train station. That's the objective when you are working with other agents, is you want to get this train to the finish line. So try not to be adversarial in any way, especially if the requests are not too big of a deal and nothing that we can't work through. Now, another thing that I would not do, especially if I'm representing the listing agent and a buyer's agent gives me a call, is I would not immediately ask for, proof of funds. That's something that, can be it's a little disrespectful, especially if the tone of the agent makes you feel like in some kind of way they may not be able to afford this listing. That's not your call, because I tell you, I say it all the time. The number one sales that I've had, I say this to my agents all the time, is some of my highest commission sales that I've had have been from the most arbitrary, weird scenarios from the buyer's agent that it just so happened to work out that way. So never make assumptions based on the conversation you're having with the other agent. if the agent has reached out to you about your listing, you have to assume that there's some professionalism that's going to happen out of the gate. That should be your assumption out of the gate. So asking questions like, where's your buyer's proof of funds? Unless you are in a situation where your seller is adamant about who comes in and out of their house, and that usually happens in your $1 million and above listings, that should not be a question that you have. If it were me, if an agent reaches out wanting to schedule a tour for my client's property, I want to show as much activity as possible. So if they just want to walk through there and record some videos for TikTok, that's great because that's still data that I'm able to present to my client to say, hey, this is the amount of traffic that we're having. So as much as I personally would welcome those that actually have viable buyer clients, I just want to show that the marketing efforts that I'm putting together on behalf of my client is working, and you'll know that you've priced the home right. You'll know that you are marketing it correctly because agents are hitting you up asking to tour their home. Now, obviously, if an agent reaches out to me, some of the ways that I at least try to find out is, hey, is the client pre-approved? That's my only question. I won't ask for proof of funds, but it'll be a yes or no question. Is your client already pre-approved? Okay, excellent. Because my seller does not want anyone coming in the home unless they are in a position to buy. But I will never ask out of the gate, can we see a proof of funds or a pre-approval letter? All of that kind of stuff is going to be baked into the offer anyway if the client decides they want to submit an offer on the property. And at that point, before we accept that offer, then I'll verify that that there's proof of funds and that there's enough to cover it. And another thing that tends to happen on closing day, don't be that agent that shows up on closing day when you're going to, in many cases, meet the other agent for the first time. Ask their client questions that are truly none of your business. I was in a closing one time and it was a VA client of mine. And this VA client, they were VA, so there was some other stuff going on. And the agent on the other end at the closing table bypassed me, didn't even acknowledge me in that moment, and asked my client, hey, how were you able to get, when they were looking at my client's, VA letter and all that stuff, how were you able to get, this property with this, it was some jargon that had to do with the VA. That doesn't matter. We're at the closing table. We're ready to go. We're clear to close. Why are you asking my client and circumventing me, not even asking me, asking my client on the closing day about how they were able to get full? It's something that has to do with the VA benefits or whatever. Don't interact with the other agent's client in any way unless that client is interacting with you. If they're asking you questions, for example, if they're asking me questions about the property or why did we sell or things like that, because obviously in many cases, if your state may not do this, but the seller and the buyer are meeting each other for the first time face to face at the closing table. So there may be some banter that they have with each other because the seller is getting ready to hand over the keys to a property that they've had for what may have been many years. They may have made amazing memories in that home. So they're wanting to know who this person is that's getting ready to start the next chapter of their lives in this person's home. So if there's banter and conversation between the two, great. But don't ask any intrusive questions of the other agent's client. It's just no bueno. And another thing I don't want to see any agent doing is arguing with another agent for no good reason. When I tell you, and it might be an Atlanta thing, I'm not sure, but there have been times when I've picked up the phone to chat with the other agent before maybe we're getting ready to submit an offer. I want to schedule a tour and I have a couple questions about the property, where the agent on the other end of the line, they are treating the conversation with me like a boxing match out of the gate. And what I mean by that is if I'm asking a series of questions, I can feel that they're getting annoyed or I can feel like they're wondering, why am I asking this specific type of question? It may mean that I'm getting ready to write an offer and I need to know a specific nuance so that I structure the offer in the most advantageous way possible to get this deal done. Again, that other agent, because they don't have any situational awareness, they're immediately short and they're not friendly at all. And you would think, especially in this market, if any agent calls on my listing, I'm going to answer that phone with a smile on my face. I'm going to be excited. I'm going to be jovial, and I'm going to be prepared to answer any and all questions that they have because I want to go back to my seller and say, hey, I think we have an offer that's coming along the way because this agent is asking some pertinent questions to a situation where I think they're getting ready to write an offer. You want to be the most friendliest person to talk to when someone has called about your listing. Do not be in any way adversarial. If you get an offer on behalf of your seller client, and maybe the offer is not at asking price, or there's some kind of negotiation stuff that they put, language that they put in there, don't call the agent back and ask them why their client is asking for money towards closing costs or some other type of situation. Don't speak on behalf of your seller client. Legally, you're supposed to submit that client in whatever form, even if an agent is offering $1 on that property, by law, you're supposed to submit that offer to your seller client. So asking, weird questions like it's your property is not the way to go about this. Now, if you talk with your client and your client has specific questions, that's going to take some time before you all decide to go under contract. So in that scenario, okay, I get it, but it better be questions that your seller is asking because maybe they need to net a certain amount of money in order for this deal to work. But don't out of the gate when you get the offer, immediately call the agent back and question them about certain aspects. The buyer's agent has a job to do, and that's to represent their client. Yes, it's to get the deal done, but they represent their client. So if an offer seems a little whatever, submit it to your seller client. Your client may actually say, "Oh, this is great. I'll take it." And if they decide to do that, that's awesome. But if they don't and they have questions, there's usually going to be some time that happens between the offer is submitted and when the counter is presented. But in many cases, you're supposed to, as a listing agent, simply submit a counter. You aren't technically supposed to call the agent back and ask about this specific request or that specific request. You're just supposed to just submit a counter offer and let that be that. But of course, we all know deals are done between the agents communicating with each other. So if it's a scenario like that, walk through it as though you want to get the deal done and you just need some clarity on specific aspects of the deal. And then if your client is good with it, let's get that thing under contract. And the last two things that I want to walk through is never insult the agent's client. Never say things like, "Hey, agent, your client is being unreasonable," or "Your client doesn't know what they're talking about. How did they come to this particular price anyway?" The one thing that gets me fired up more than anything is when another agent is attacking my client in any kind of way. I don't care if my client actually did do something wrong. I represent them and I represent their best interest. When an agent attacks my client in any way or makes accusatory statements about them, I shut that down immediately. You know why? Because I represent my client, and my client, in many ways, I treat them like family. So if an agent in any way attacks my client, even though they've never met them, but maybe the way that I'm responding to some of their concerns because I'm voicing the concerns of my client may rub them the wrong way, tough cookies, okay? It's time to put your big boy, big girl pants on. If a client does not want to sell for a certain price, if I'm the listing agent, I cannot force their hand because it is their investment at the end of the day. So it's got to make sense to their bottom line. And if I've submitted an offer on a property and my client's offer is their highest and their best, and I've explained to you that it's their highest and their best, I'm not going to do your job for you and go back to my client and express to them to pay more than they're comfortable with just to get a deal done. And because you feel like the home is worth more or we're countering too low or whatever the case is, calling my client unreasonable will be the fastest way for your brother, your uncle, your favorite realtor's favorite realtor to no longer be your favorite realtor because I might have to tell you where to go and how to get there. At the end of the day, it's a conversation between myself and the brokerage I represent and the client that I'm working for, and you and the brokerage you represent and the clients that you are advocating for. So if we cannot come to an agreement on something, that is okay. We will move on to the next property. you will move on to the next buyer client. That's the way it has to go. But like I said, these situations are few and far between. Many agents are some of the best salt of the earth people that you will ever meet. And especially if their home has been on the market significantly longer, then they really become some of the friendliest people in the world. So if you are a newer agent and you've dealt with one of the scenarios that we talked through today, let me know in the comments. How did you respond to it? How did you react to it? And of course, if you're a veteran agent and you are dealing with this kind of stuff, let's get a conversation going, because I know for me, when I deal with these types of scenarios, I'm always going to be positive and smiling. And like I said, even if I got to bless you out, I'm gonna do it in a way that you're not gonna see me rattled. You know, at the end of the day, I am a professional. I have a reputation to maintain, and I've got clients that I have to serve and work for. So if a scenario is just not the most positive experience because of that other agent, it is what it is. There are other homes on the market that we will find, and we just move on to the next one. If you got value from today's video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button. And before you go, YouTube has actually picked this specific video for you. Yeah, you. YouTube thinks this video right here is going to be of extreme value to you. So before you jump off here, check out this one more video before you go, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.